Hi, this is Eva for Once Upon a Timeline, and today we're going to talk about creatures that are being turned into zombies. So you may have heard about this first one. It's the ant that gets infected by a fungus. The fungus takes over the brain of the ant, causing the ant to climb to a location a little higher above trails of ants, and then it causes the ant to somehow clamp down on a twig or branch or leaf, and then the ant dies there, and then the fungus sprouts a giant fruiting body out of the back of the ant, and the spores rain down onto passing ants below, and the cycle repeats. Now, the first time I heard about this was maybe a few years ago. At that time, there was just one kind of fungus that does this. Now there are hundreds. And you will see that the fruiting bodies are getting longer and longer and weirder. That's the fruiting body here. It's basically the thing that makes the spores that go down onto the lower ants. Okay, so it turns out the U.S. has one of these zombifying funguses, and that's this one right here. They're everywhere now. So you may also notice that the variety of the fruiting bodies has significantly expanded, and now on some of the ants there are two of these spore packs that come out. This one's really long here. There's all different looks now to it. Some of them are just extra weird, like this one here looks like two weird antennae. So yeah, it's really expanded this whole zombie ant thing. There are so many different ants that are infected with it now, supposedly. Look at that one. Just so weird. Okay, so that's the ants. But this whole concept of the zombification of other creatures has really expanded since the ants. I mean, there are so many of them. This is a rather recent one. This is actually a snail that has been taken over by the larva of this creature here. And the larva, there are parasitic worms, but this is in their larva form, it causes the creature, the snail, to climb up to a higher area and broad daylight. Now, normally these snails are nocturnal and they hide, but this kind of brainwashes them into climbing up to this area where birds can find them. Now, strangely, these larvae need to go into bird stomachs as part of their life cycle. So supposedly they're imitating caterpillars here, because normally birds don't like to eat snails. And so they imitate these caterpillars, and the birds are supposed to bite the eye stalks off of these snails, and then the larvae are in where they want to be. So this is pretty weird. So they're making this fluctuation here. Supposedly they only do this during the day. Even though worms have no brains, somehow they know to only fluctuate during the day. And supposedly the snail can actually live through this and regenerate its eye stalks, which is also really interesting. So yeah, this is a very new one here. A lot of these new parasites are having very complicated life cycles, going through multiple hosts. They're going through hosts that you would not expect to have these creatures. For instance, that last one, somehow the parasite needs to get into birds, but it goes through snails, but then birds don't eat snails. So how did that even come to pass? It's just weird. I mean, Darwin's going to have a hard time explaining a lot of this stuff, because how does this creature then need to get into an animal that would not have normally eaten it? How would it develop that? Okay, so here's another one. The lancet fluke or flatworm. The parasite lives in three hosts. First, snail eats cow dung that has the eggs. The eggs hatch in the snail, and the snail then entraps the larvae and pushes them out. Then an ant comes along and eats the slime. Then the parasites get into the ant. And here's where it's weird. One of them sets up some of the parasites set up around the nerves that control the ant's mandibles, and other parasites set up around the head. The parasite needs to spend its time in liver of a cow. So cows don't eat ants. Again, this is weird. So that somehow the ant has to get into the cow. So what it does is, with the two different parasites controlling two regions of the ant, is the ant climbs up to a top of a juicy piece of grass and clamps down and waits there, and then hopes that a cow will come and eat the grass and accidentally eat the ant, and then the cow's liver gets infected with these worms, and then the cycle repeats. So again, that's just weird. You know, cows don't eat ants, so how could these larvae form a cycle where they force the ant to eat the cow? It's just too hard to comprehend how such a thing would naturally be created. Okay, so here's another one. The larvae of the parasitic worms Glyptophanteles may be feeding on the caterpillars. The wasp deposits 80 eggs in the caterpillars. When the eggs hatch, some of the eggs eventually, well, they all turn into larvae, and then some of them squeeze out of the caterpillar and spin a cocoon, but the other larvae stay in the caterpillar and control the caterpillar to make it defend the cocoons. So the caterpillar stays there and fights off any and all attackers that it can and protects the cocoon. So no word what happens to the larvae that stay behind, but it sounds like those larvae are basically sacrificing themselves for the other larvae that escape. So it's pretty weird, because then the caterpillar dies off of this. So all those leftover larvae would then die. So it's really kind of a complicated system, even within just these larvae. Very weird. All right, so the next one, I showed some video of this one in a recent live stream, but I wasn't sure what it was. But I realize now that this is more of a zombie attack thing. So this is a cricket. It gets infected with these worms that grow inside the cricket. Now, these worms do two things. One, it causes the cricket to stop chirping so that it will survive longer. Chirping crickets are more likely to get eaten, so it silences the cricket. And then when they're ready to hatch out, these worms cause the cricket to go out and look for water and jump in. Now, normally, crickets will not go into water because they're bad swimmers. So these crickets jump in, and usually the crickets will die, and then all these worms will come out, and that's part of their life cycle, is that they infect things in the water. So, I mean, these things are called horsehair worms, and they can reach up to a foot. Now, I've seen some locations saying that there is a 6-foot long variety of horsehair worm, but I was not able to find any more info on that. So that one, I think, is still incubating. Okay, so now here's another one. You might have seen this one. This one's a little bit older, ME. Basically, this little creature here hatches inside a fish's gills and climbs up to its tongue, and then it slurps the fluids out of the tongue until the tongue dies, and then it takes the place of the tongue and sits there and chomps on food that comes in that the fish eats. And it just stays there for a really long time. So these fish can survive with this thing in their mouth. Now, there's some new storyline to this that I did not see at first. The storyline now is that these creatures are born without a gender, without a sex. And then as they develop in the gills, one of them turns female and goes into the mouth region, and the rest stay male, mate with her when she's in the mouth region, and then leave. So that's kind of a weird thing, because you have the different offspring all mating with each other in this storyline. So then after the mating, all the little eggs are spread out from the mouth of the fish. This one I assume shows a male and a female here. It doesn't really explain. It says a pair of tongue lice attach to the inside of fish. So I'm not sure if we're going to get more than one. I have not found any storyline yet on that, or if that's just going to be a male. So that one's pretty weird. You can see some images of this tongue louse here. This one shows how it's inside the mouth here. There's another one. So they're saying a number of fish can be infected by these tongue louse. I guess that's a small one there. Anyway, yes, definitely gross. All right, so here's another one. This stuff, this bacteria, this pathogenic fungus called Batricotrytium dendrobatidis. I probably killed that name pretty bad, but it's BD for short. BD has been blamed for the extinction of hundreds of amphibian species and poses a threat to up to 1/3 of the world's frogs, salamanders, and other amphibians. So I've never even heard of this, but apparently it's slaughtering millions. Strangely, not any word on it, though, until just now. But so this BD, it kills some species, but other species are able to survive. But weirdly, the males become more sexually active. They're lethargic all the time except for when they're looking for a mate, and then that behavior doubles. And by mating with the females, he spreads the fungus. So there's a theory that this BD is somehow controlling these frogs to mate more so it can spread more. So it's basically an STD for frogs. Okay, so the last one, these zombie barnacles. These zombie barnacles infect crabs. They get onto the back of the crab and they cause all the male crabs to act like female crabs. And then they lay their eggs in the region of the crab where the crab would normally have its own eggs. But now it has these parasitic eggs. And weirdly, since all the males act like females and the females still act like females, these crabs protect these eggs and they nurture them until the eggs hatch. When it's ready to produce, the parasite creates an egg sac that develops in the same area that a female crab's egg normally would go. This parasite doesn't discriminate based on gender. It quickly makes both genders neutral. So the parasite is really controlling their body. Their bodies are taken over and they're just being used as factories. Okay, so there's one thing that a lot of these stories have in common. It's just zombification of other creatures. We have insects, we have frogs, we have crabs. There's also a lot of weird sexual things where some of them change the gender or the behaviors. So there's a lot of gender swapping. That just seems to be a theme with the ME and on a lot of the animals. But it goes beyond just these lower animals. It goes beyond just frogs and crabs and insects. There are actually quite a few weird stories coming out with mammals and even humans having zombie issues. So in our next segment, part 2, I will be discussing the human factor. This is Eva signing off for Once Upon a Timeline.